Picture a guy in a beat-up car, wearing Kmart clothes, living in a one-bedroom apartment in the worst part of Toronto. Nothing about him screams high roller. Nothing suggests he's about to pull off one of the most audacious bank frauds in Canadian history. Brian Molony wasn't your typical criminal mastermind. No flashy lifestyle, no cocaine-fueled parties, no designer suits or expensive watches, just a quiet, unassuming bank employee with a degree in journalism and a gambling problem that would eventually shut down an entire casino. It started innocent enough. Brian's dad used to take him to the racetrack as a kid, teaching him how to read the odds, pick winners, understand the game. By 12, Brian placed his first bet. $2 on a horse. The horse won. That rush, that electric feeling of picking right, of beating the system, it hooked him instantly. But here's where it gets interesting. Brian wasn't some degenerate burning through paychecks at the local casino. He was smart. Brilliant, actually. Scored so high on the Canadian Imperial Bank of Commerce aptitude test that they fast-tracked him straight into management training right out of university. By 26, he was assistant manager with access to millions in loan approvals. The bank trusted him completely. Clean record, sharp mind, perfect employee. That trust would cost them $10.2 million. September 1980, Brian needed $22,300 to cover a gambling loss. Just once, he told himself, one fraudulent loan, he'd win it back, pay it off, nobody would ever know. He fabricated a borrower, forged the documents, approved the loan himself, transferred the money. Easy, and that's the problem with easy money. It never stays easy, and it's never enough. Brian didn't pocket the cash, didn't buy a mansion or a Ferrari. He took every single dollar straight to the casinos. Atlantic City, Las Vegas, anywhere he could place a bet, because Brian wasn't interested in being rich. He was interested in the game, the action, that electrical current running through his veins every time the dice rolled or the cards flipped. He'd bet $75,000 on a single hand of blackjack without flinching, drop $500,000 on a football game. The amounts kept escalating because the rush required bigger and bigger stakes. By 1981, Brian had created an entire ecosystem of fake companies and phantom borrowers. He'd approve a fraudulent loan, transfer the money to an intermediary account, convert it to bank drafts, wire it to the California Clearing Corporation, a Vegas casino subsidiary specifically designed to move gambling money without detection. The genius of it? He'd use new fake loans to make payments on old fake loans, creating this elaborate shell game that made everything look legitimate to auditors. As long as he kept the cycle going, nobody noticed. He made 37 trips to Caesars Boardwalk Regency in Atlantic City over 15 months. At first, he'd stuff hundreds of thousands in cash into his clothes, literally carrying $350,000 on his body through airport security. His car keys set off the metal detector, and he couldn't reach them because bills were packed so tight around them. He stood there, sweating through his shirt, somehow managing to fish out the keys without revealing the fortune strapped to his torso. After that scare, Caesars got creative. They started flying him on private jets, gave him suites, made everything smooth and comfortable because they had a whale on the hook, and whales like Brian were worth keeping happy. Here's the twisted part. Brian never took the perks. No fancy dinners, no prostitutes, no Dom Perignon in the penthouse. He'd fly in on the private jet, go straight to the tables, and gamble until he either passed out or ran out of money. The casino loved him. A gambling addict with apparently unlimited funds who didn't cost them anything in comps. March 1982. Brian lost $1.4 million in a single weekend. Not over weeks or months, one weekend. The money meant nothing to him. Winning meant nothing. It was the action itself. The pure, uncut adrenaline of risk. He'd later describe it as an orgasmic rush that had nothing to do with pleasure and everything to do with compulsion. He once bet $5,000 on 40 different college football games. Lost every single one. 200 grand gone in a day. Normal people would see that as a sign to stop. Brian saw it as a variance he needed to correct. April 26th, 1982, Brian sat down at the craps table at Caesars Atlantic City. Over the next several hours, he lost $1 million. The casino started asking questions, not because they cared about Brian, they'd been enabling him for over a year, but because the amounts were getting difficult to explain even by Vegas standards. Meanwhile, back in Toronto, police had stumbled onto Brian through a completely unrelated wiretap investigation. They weren't even looking for him, but the intercepted calls painted a picture of someone moving obscene amounts of money with no apparent legitimate source. April 27th, 1982. The day after his $1 million loss, Brian got arrested in Toronto. The bank's audit revealed the scope. 93 fraudulent loans, over 10 million Canadian dollars, nearly 2 years of systematically robbing one of the country's largest financial institutions, and here's the kicker. Brian had lost almost every penny at the tables, no offshore accounts, no hidden assets. The entire fortune evaporated into casino coffers across America. CIBC sued Caesars, arguing the casino knowingly enabled fraud by never verifying where a low-level bank employee was getting millions to gamble. Caesars claimed they never asked for ID or financial verification, which was either the dumbest policy in gambling history or a deliberately blind eye to obvious criminal activity. The lawsuit settled privately, but New Jersey's gaming enforcement decided to make an example. November 30th, 1985, the Saturday after Thanksgiving, one of the busiest gambling days of the year, Caesars Atlantic City was forced to shut down completely for 24 hours. Casino employees sarcastically called it Brian Molony Day. The shutdown cost Caesars somewhere between $700,000 and $800,000 in lost revenue. 6 employees got fined $36,500 for their role in enabling Brian's spree. It was the only time in Atlantic City's legal gambling history that a single gambler caused a casino to cease operations. Brian pleaded guilty in November 1983, 6-year sentence. He served 2.5 years. No dramatic courtroom speeches, no defiant stand. He just admitted everything and went to prison. That's addiction talking. That's the irrational logic of someone who can't see past the next bet. When Philip Seymour Hoffman agreed to play Brian in the 2003 film Owning Molony, he spent 3 hours in Brian's suburban office trying to understand what drives a man to obliterate his entire life for something as intangible as a gambling rush. Neither man ever publicly discussed what happened in that meeting, but Hoffman captured something essential in his performance, this quiet, unremarkable man containing an enormous destructive need that eventually consumed everything. Brian got out of prison and rebuilt. Married his girlfriend, who somehow forgave the whole disaster. Had 3 kids, became a management consultant, and ironically speaks at gambling addiction seminars. He's been sober from gambling for over 40 years now. Attends Gamblers Anonymous, slowly paid back what he could to the bank through court-ordered restitution. He'll tell anyone who asks, "I will always be an addicted player. It's a progressive, evolving disease. You can't heal from it. It can only be held under arrest. Not held in check, not cured, arrested. Like a criminal impulse that never completely goes away, just temporarily detained. The man who shut down a casino with someone else's $10 million now works a regular job in Pickering, Ontario, drives a modest car, lives in a modest house, by all appearances, totally ordinary. Which, when you think about it, is exactly how this whole thing started.